Wichita, Kansas housing market report for April is what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to get into just some of the different observations I'm seeing, some of the problems with that, and then also the solutions for it. So without all that, I'm just going to go ahead and start sharing my screen and share with you some of the things that I have to share, and we'll just start going from there. Part of this is both from a national market report that we pull from, but then also I make observations based on our local Wichita market from working in here. And the first one I'm going to go over is the fact that probably what most everybody realizes is that we have a shortage of inventory, and that wasn't really just from the pandemic. The pandemic kind of amplified that and really highlighted that fact, but this has been going on for, I would say, 10 to 13 years. You can see on this chart here where for 13 straight years, single family housing units completed, meaning like how many new homes have been built, has been below the 50-year average for 13 straight years now. So really this has been an ongoing like 10-year trend that we've been seeing a shortage of inventory, and it's just continued to drop. And a lot of that has to do with a couple things. One, builders can't build houses fast enough. But then also two, it's almost like the analogy that we've been using with people is that it's like you have let's say you got a shower and you're trying to fill the tub up with water, which would be your housing inventory, and you have the faucet on, but you have the drain on at the same time. So right as soon as houses are coming on the market, they're going off the market. And so there's no tub of inventory. There's no hot water being filled in that tub per se in order to analyze houses that are actively on the market. They're going on and off that much more fluidly to where we have a dynamic market. And that's what's been going on for the last 10 years. So that what you're seeing is on the retail side of things is that people don't list their house for sale for weeks and months on end. It takes days and hours to sell them anymore. And so our unit of measurement is off because we move faster than ever. And that has finally caught up to real estate full force, to where people are kind of just hovering over their keyboards, hovering over their phones. Realtors are getting better at relaying houses faster to people, to where, some naive realtors will sell them in hours. Really, you should wait about 3 to 6 days to sell them. But that still remains the fact of it takes 3 to 6 days to sell a house, not 3 to 6 weeks, like has historically been known to sell a house. So that's been going on as a trend for the last 10 years. And that's a big reason why we have such a shortage of inventory. And I think that'll still take another 2 to 3 years to really resolve all that. And that has to do with builders building more houses. But I don't think the retail situation will ever change from a static market to it's now going to be more of a dynamic market where houses come on the market and are off the market very fluidly and very fast, and to where there's a lot more going on behind the scenes before that house ever hits the market. Because as soon as it hits the market, like, it's going to get sold. And you almost have to be a student of the market. You have to sit down with your realtor ahead of time and study the market with your realtor ahead of time to see what homes are coming on for and what they're selling for. And talk to your realtor about, really studying what homes are coming on the market for and what they're selling for. Because we're seeing them going, over asking price. And it's a matter of knowing by how much do you really need to go over asking price, because that's a big shock for most people. But the next piece I got to get into is a lot of people have a concern of if this bubble is going to pop. It's not a bubble. What we have is simply a lack of supply. If we had a bubble like 06 and 08, when all that happened, you would see we would actually have an excess of houses we couldn't sell. We have the reverse fashion where we don't have enough houses to sell. And that's a large reason why the bubble popped back in 06 to 08, is because there was so much inventory to be sold, where now we don't have inventory. So that's a completely different situation there, as you can see from this chart. One reason it's not the same, because I know everybody has that fear in the back of their mind of, is this going to be like 06 and 08? And the answer is no, because there's actually been some price appreciation surveys they've done showing that over the next 6 years, it'll continue to appreciate. So, and a lot of that is, people are putting a lot of cash into real estate. We just had we have a buyer. He's a good conventional buyer. and we lost the last 3 offers to all cash offers. And they're around the 145, 160 range. And we were escalating to above asking price and still losing to a cash offer. So there's a lot of people dumping their cash into real estate. I don't entirely blame them. It's a great, safe place to put your money, because really what you're banking on there is the desirability of living in the U.S., in your region, in your location, in your neighborhood. And that's really what we're studying here when we study real estate. Yes, the house has a consideration, but more than anything, we're studying the popularity of your country, city, and neighborhood and house location specifically. So anyway, with all that, you can kind of see where, even though as much as things are appreciating, like we're appreciating at a 9.2% in 2020, that wasn't above 04 and 05, where you can see what led up to the housing crisis was an average annual appreciation of 10.3%. We're at an average annual appreciation of 6.3%. So, I mean, we're nowhere near where we were before. And that's where you really want to use percentages to keep everything in scale in an appropriate fashion, so we're not losing our head, emotionally with everything. So that's just an observation there. Another observation comparing, the housing crisis to what we're dealing with now, is the home equity that's cashed out, because a lot of what happened in the middle of this pandemic is, instead of people selling their houses, they refinanced. There was a big refinance surge where a bunch of people, once interest rates dropped, they didn't sell their house and go buy another one. They stayed in their current house and they just cashed out with the refinance, which is a lot of what happened in 2020. But it's nothing like what happened in 2006, where you had $321 billion cashed out through refinances in 06, where in 2020 we had half of that. So that's a major factor to keep in mind, that is a lot of money that people are cashing out, but there was a limit. They put a limit on this, on how many people were allowed to refinance. Because I remember talking to some people who were looking at refinancing, but they missed the boat and they just flat out weren't allowed to refinance. And so there's a lot more control, a lot more regulation around this. Whereas back when the housing crisis happened, it was a lot more of a free reign of just however much money you want. Now they're putting caps on this amount so that we don't literally wreck our system again. The next one I had to go over, again, it's just another display of this, of how much, the refinances were not like 2006, because I know there's people that have a concern about a quote unquote bubble popping, but we don't have a bubble. We just have a lack of inventory, which is increasing prices, but it's not necessarily causing a major crisis like it did back in 2006. Really what it is just kind of stalling the market out. And I have some solutions out here in a sec, which I'll get to, but I know a lot of people's main concern is fears that they think that this is like 06, 08 again, and it's not. And a lot of that has to do with this piece right here, which is how difficult it is to get a loan right now. Back then it was super easy to get a loan. There's a lot of risky products, a lot of borrowers that are riskier, but now those products aren't allowed, for one. And also, the amount of scrutiny you have to go through, whether you're W-2 or self-employed, to get a loan is harder than ever. And that's what's making it even harder to get loans, to have any of this go through. So it's a lot safer, more conservative situation, so that people that are getting loans really can get the loans. And I think enough people are being a lot more financially savvy, since the 06, 08 situation, to really scrutinize what they're taking on here, instead of just willy-nilly buying houses left and right. They're being a lot smarter about all this, and which I personally like, because they're taking more of a strategic approach instead of just running around, like flying around buying and selling houses, because that's really not the way this should happen. The silver lining in all this, here's this graph that shows you the year-over-year change in home equity. If you're in Kansas here, on average, you had an increase in equity of about $23,000, i.e. you made $23,000 by making your house payment, staying in your house. You can also kind of get an idea of what some of the other, regions or states in your area, what they appreciate at, to give you kind of an idea that that's the silver lining of this whole thing, is that your house did go up in value on everything. So that's definitely a big plus on this. And I'll give you the solution to all this. So there's two things that need to happen in order for us to get quote unquote out of this inventory crisis. And they call it a crisis because I really don't think it's that big of like a crisis per se. It's more just a shortage of inventory. There's two things that need to happen. One, builders need to build more houses, and with the cost of lumber, and it's not even just a cost of lumber thing. It was a lack of supply of lumber. And so, it wasn't just houses that were not in supply. It was lumber that wasn't in supply, because in the middle of pandemic, they shut down the mills. And so you couldn't build houses because there wasn't material available. Even if these builders could buy it for whatever price it was, it just physically wasn't available. So now as the mills get back up and running and they start churning out more and more lumber so that we can build more and more houses, that's one solution. The other solution is using alternative building products besides just lumber. Like I know one of my builders is using a fiberboard that's just as readily available for the wall sheathing, still using OSB on the roof to be a durable product, but the wall sheathing that doesn't need quite as much vertical stability and just more horizontal stability for going in that fashion. You can use an alternative product like fiberboard as one example. Using other alternative products besides lumber is a viable option to get these houses built faster, and fulfill the demand for what we're needing for houses for new builds. The other solution is boomers need to sell their house. And a lot of that is that we see the boomer generation who's been living in their house for 20, 30, 40 years, continuing to sit on their houses for that long. And really what it's doing is it's stalling out the market, is because boomers are sitting on their house. And since they're sitting on their house, that's not allowing the first time home seller to sell their house to move into the bigger house. And since the first time sellers aren't selling their house, the first time buyers can't get into their first house. And so because the boomers at the top of the spectrum are not selling their house, it's stalling this whole market all the way down to the bottom. But they're maybe not considering that situation because they usually have an attitude of, I like my house, it's familiar, it's stable. With all the craziness going on in the world, this is the one thing that's not changed. And so I can understand why they wouldn't want to change it, because that's a big, life transition to either downsize or move to like a vacation home type of situation. And really it's going to be, as a nation, as a group of realtors, we're going to be needing to help the boomer generation through that next life phase. And it's more of a life coaching service approach than it is just to like, hey, I want to sell your house. And I think helping them through that next life phase and understanding the full gravity of the situation and how it's smart and appropriate to go ahead and let's sell that house and let's move on to your next life phase is going to be really where the opportunity is as realtors, is to help, that generation on to the next phase. And I say that like not just intermediate year time frame, that's going to be going on for the next 5-10 years, I would say, is that we got to fix that stall. And a lot of that stall has to come from boomers wanting to just sit on their house and not transact and then let the whole economy flow because of all that. So that's where I see the two solutions are. Builders got to build more, boomers got to sell, and that will get everything churning again. And I wouldn't say that it's going to dip. It would just say it's going to continue to rise and it's going to level out. And then we'll see where it's at from there. Once we start to fill some of this demand with supply, then it'll start to level out a little bit more. And then we'll see what we're dealing with, from there, whether that's 2 years from now, 5 years from now, who knows, but it'll be here for a while on everything. But appreciate you watching. As always, if you would, please like, comment, subscribe on this, share this with anyone else that you think it would be worthwhile to. I appreciate you watching as always. We'll talk to you later.